Getting Warm by Gary McMahon. The fire cast strange shadows around the room, like groping fingers, and Becky felt them tugging at her hair as she sat staring at her guest across the table. She picked up a glass, took a sip of good Highland Scotch, and then replaced the glass on the table. Do you ever feel like it changed you? Sandra had not spoken for several minutes, and her words came as a shock. I mean, changed you inside? Becky smiled, shook her head. No, I refuse to let that happen. I still refuse. We went through hell out there, but I'm still the same person. Sandra glanced out the window at the snow pasting the edges of the pane, and then returned her gaze to Becky. Is that why you live in the middle of nowhere, all alone in this cabin? Because it didn't change you. He didn't change you. She licked her lips. The tip of her tongue was small, fat and pink, like the bald head of a baby rat. Listen, said Becky, straightening her spine against the back of the chair. I didn't ask you here. You just took it upon yourself to come. What business do you have casting aspersions on my life, the way I've conducted myself? The cabin roof groaned beneath the weight of the snow. It sounded like something stirring up there, waking from a long sleep. I'm sorry. Sandra stood up and walked to the window. She stared out at the vast white wilderness. That was presumptuous of me. To be honest, I think a lot of the things you've said and done have been presumptuous. Becky pressed her feet against the floorboards and pushed the chair backwards, away from the table. The fire crackled, charcoal bursting like popcorn in the heat. When you wrote that book, you didn't even contact me. It would have been nice if you'd, asked my permission. She stared at Sandra's back, but Sandra did not turn around. She stood with her arms folded, staring out of the window. Snow fell like television interference on the other side of the glass. You talked about me on that TV show, as if I was just a character in your book, not a real person. Becky's anger was like a slab of ice in her belly. You even took all the credit for getting us out of there, painting me as some helpless bitch who could barely even think on her own. She stopped, falling silent. This was pointless. Becky knew what she had done, how she had manipulated the facts to make herself look good, to turn herself into the heroine, to sell copies of her book. They both knew it, and to put it into words was hardly worth the effort. I'm sorry. Sandra was still facing the window, but her body had relaxed. Her arms were now hanging straight down by her sides. I didn't mean to hurt you. We were in it together. We were equal. No, we were never that. The words were out before she could stop them. She bit her lip, trying to prevent any further poison escaping into the world. I deserve that, said Sandra, finally turning around. The firelight lit her face in a gentle red glow, rendering her inhuman. Her mouth was open. Becky had never before noticed that she had such sharp teeth. When he took us and locked us in that basement, we became equal. We weren't before, and we aren't now, but during that space of time, that week of hell, we both became victims. We were the same, bonded by blood. Becky stood and approached the fire. She felt cold, shriveled. She held out her hands to warm them on the flames, but they remained icy. Her fingers, when she stared at them, did not look like they belonged to her body. They had been grafted there, taken from someone else and surgically attached to the bone. They were like steel, like knives. We were never the same, Sandra. She could say no more. Her thoughts were confused, a flurry of blankness, like the falling snow outside. Never. She heard Sandra's footsteps as she walked across the cabin floor. They were light, hollow, barely there at all. You have changed, she said softly. All this isolation, and the fact that you can't even look me in the eye when we speak. Everything. It's all different. You never knew me, said Becky. Not really. We were in extremis. All you ever saw was my fear, my terror. Other than that, we've never really met before. The footsteps stopped just behind her. Sandra's voice, when it came, was like hot breath on her neck. But that week when we were down in the basement, when he tortured us, we knew each other in a way that two people never can. We were more intimate than lovers. Becky was still cold, her hands, her body, her heart, cold as ice. She turned slowly, resigned now that she needed to be honest. Brutal. You're fooling yourself. You created something in that damn book of yours, a fiction. It never really happened, not like you say it did. Think about it. Remember how it went down, that last night. Remember what I did. Sandra's eyes emptied, and then, like a jug filling with water, they gradually took on a knowing quality. Shadows grasped at her shoulders, but her face was bright and firelit. Remember that it was me who killed him, despite what you wrote in your stupid little book. Sandra nodded. Her face had taken on a look of gauntness, a quality very much like death. Yes, you did. Becky reached out and placed her cold, cold hands on Sandra's shoulders. I killed him, and I liked it. Sandra's eyelids fluttered like tiny trapped birds. Her bottom jaw hinged open. That small bloated tongue lay motionless in her mouth. I enjoyed it so much that it made me realise my entire life had been a sham. You were right, I did change. I changed for the better. Everything I thought I'd been before was an act, a movie role. Killing that bastard opened doors inside me that I've not been able to close. Sandra was shaking now. Her shoulders twitched. That's why I've retreated here, to live in silence. It's why I never turned up at any of your book signings or went on daytime television to talk about what happened to us. Because I'm like him, the man who took us. If anyone ever met me properly, it was that man. We were like lovers, as close and intimate as two human beings could ever be. He saw inside my skin. He peeled it away to reveal my truth. Sandra backed away, her thigh brushing against the table. A piece of cutlery, a fork or a spoon, clattered to the floor, making too much noise in the quiet of the cabin. Just go, said Becky, turning to her seat. She sat down slowly without making any sudden movements. She was cold, so very cold, but the danger only ever appeared when she felt warm. When the fire, her captor, first victim, teacher, had started inside and burst into life. Go now. Without saying another word, Sandra grabbed her padded coat, threw it on and opened the door. Snow rushed in, scattering like confetti across the floor. The wind howled a greeting. The door slammed shut. Sandra was gone. Becky closed her eyes. Sandra would not get far, not in this weather. And even if she did, Becky knew her publisher's address. She was certain that she could get them to talk. She opened her eyes and moved away from the table, walked back to the fire. She took the book, Sandra's monstrous book, from the mantelpiece and opened it to the correct page. She sat down on the floor in front of the fire, removed the bookmark and began to reread a story whose two versions she already knew by heart. The flames reached for her, but she was cold, right down inside where the door stood open. If she read for long enough and stayed there next to the fire all night, perhaps she might start to get warm.